Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto will either be the strongest shinobi or die trying. On that day years ago, they put their faith in him. Naruto made a promise that he would be the best ninja he could be. Either all alone, or together with friends, he was going to make his family proud. Whether the ninja underworld wanted him to or not, he'd either die trying, or become the strongest shinobi in history. Find out here. Welcome aboard. Chapter 1, Where do ninjas come from? Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto or history's strongest disciple Kenichi, the ninja. Practitioners of the more clandestine aspects of combat such as sabotage, espionage, infiltration, and assassination. Formidable in open combat, capable of going head-to-head with their contrasting contemporaries in the samurai. And much like the samurai, their time in the annals of Japanese history came and went, with only small schools of ninjutsu here and there surviving. Much like the art of swordsmanship that had dwindled to a specifically small amount of serious practitioners that live and die by their craft. Yes, their time in the annals of Japanese history had passed them by. The last gasp of ninja relevancy went out the door over a comparatively swift period of around 20 years after Commodore Matthew Perry forced Japan to open itself up to the rest of the world in the 1850s. Japan became westernized. But then again, so did the ninja. While many other clans died out or faded away into obscurity, others banded together when they found themselves without masters in use in a country that had little use for their original purpose any longer. Those that banded together took note of the outside world and extended their reach farther than most people would ever come to know and live to tell of. From all corners of the globe the ninjas resided and recruited, belonging to the one great clan that trained them. First-generation ninjas would have children that would then be trained as ninjas before they were returned to them to continue living average lives, and so on and so forth, living amongst the regular people until they were called upon to act. Then they would once more return to their normal lives. The clan was no modern fighting force, numbers only hovering around 1,000 at its strongest, but they were specialized warriors, sticking closely to their traditions but still adapting to the times. While there were still very few entire families that were still ninjas as remnants from the era gone by, first-generation ninjas for the last 100 years were taken in by recruiters out of extremely young orphans or runaways willing to accept the offer. But they were so young it could be borderline perceived as exploitation. Any generation past a first-generation ninja would live with their parents until the age of 5, when they would be sent to the island of origin to train underneath the masters there. Parents would be allowed to see their children twice a year and on birthdays until the ninja in training came of age at 15, where they would be sent back to their families. Those without families would be sent out into the world to go it alone and live normal civilian lives. But all kept in contact with the clan, in the instance that their services were required for the work they had trained for most of their childhoods for. Their work was for the good of the clan, that hired themselves out to anyone they saw fit. No one was their lord or master. The last bastion of true, pure ninjutsu in the world. The Great Confederation of the Old Clans, Konohagakure. Prologue. A bundle of nerves sat in the stomach of 6-year-old Uzumaki Naruto. He'd spent the last 12 hours on a boat going to some place he'd only heard by name for a few years, and now he was on the place where his parents said they'd been when they were his age. Some island called the homeland. That was what his mother and father kept telling him anyway. He didn't even know where it was. All he knew was that it was a long way away from home and it took a long time to get there. Even the ninjas that lived there or worked for the clan didn't get to know where it was. His mother told him that you had to reach the rank of jounin to know exactly where the island was. They knew, but until he got there, he'd have to get his orders from his nearest contact when he left. That wasn't going to be for a long time though. I don't want you or the old man to go, Mom. Little Naruto said, clinging tightly to his mother's leg as she walked with him through the stone halls full of other children standing in their doorways and staring at the new arrival. The little scruffy-headed blonde boy hadn't left her side for the entire trip to the island, and once they reached the dorms where the kids would stay for the duration of their 9-year training, "Why can't I go home?" No one looked mean thus far. Just curious. But it was still scary. He didn't know any of those other kids. Uzumaki Kushina was a lovely woman with long, bright red hair that was completely different from Naruto's own. He got that from her husband. She had a black clip in her hair departed out of her face, and for the occasion of sending her first and only child off to train she chose to wear a gold and white colored sleeveless dress and black high-heeled sandals. Something memorable so that her little one would have something of a memory of her until he saw her next. Kushina couldn't keep the frown off of her face at her little son's query. She'd kept a brave face and a smile up for Naruto's sake, and Minato had been strong, but now that she was back in the very halls where she'd spent much of her childhood, it hit her full on that she was about to hand her baby over for the majority of his. It broke her heart, but she knew that the day was going to come from the moment that she had given birth to him. She was a ninja. Her husband was a ninja. Her family had been ninjas. It was the way things were, and this was how it had to be. It always had been. It's the only way you can be trained. It's forbidden for the ninja arts to be taught outside of the homeland for a Konoha ninja. There are a lot of reasons, like tradition, to instill values, and then there's dash. Kushina realized that she was beginning to go on a tangent, as she had a habit of doing when she was nervous, and stopped only to pick Naruto off of the ground into her arms. I know it'll be hard, baby, but when you learn how to read better, we'll write you all the time, and you'll see Minato and I one time in the winter and the summer, and on your birthday too. Parents were restricted to 3 visits a year. This wasn't some boarding school. You promise? Absolutely, Tebane. Kushina said cheerfully with a big reassuring grin. We can send you things through the contacts to the island, and they'll tell us all about how you're doing. So don't act up or we'll hear all about it. Don't think just because you'll be here that you can get away with what you want. You do what they tell you or I'll find a way to get you, okay? And you'll never know. I am a ninja after all. I'll be good. Naruto quickly promised, waving his arms defensively. Knowing some of what his mother was capable of, she probably could sneak onto that island and off without anyone ever knowing, and at times her temper could be pretty frightening. You don't gotta do that. A sharp whistle farther down the hall attracted Kushina to where Minato was standing by a closed door. He'd gone on ahead to get the key to Naruto's room, to drop off the boy's luggage, and all sorts of other things that needed to be hashed out for his child's stay. Namake's Minato was a tall man by Naruto's childish standards, and his posture was smooth, as if he were contemplating every move he could possibly make, even though there was absolutely nothing happening. His hair was blonde and spiky like Naruto's, only more untamed, with bangs framing his face that reached down to his jaw. He wore brown slacks and a silver dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. As Kushina approached with Naruto, he gifted his son with a warm smile and set his hand on the boy's head. Well, this is your room, Naruto. It's all yours, and I've unpacked your clothes and other things. You can put everything else where you want it to be later. What do you think? Naruto always thought his dad looked so cool. Way cooler than any other kid's dad. Other kids could say that their dads could beat up each other's dads all they wanted to. Naruto could definitely say it and not have it be speculation. Actually, his dad could also kill anyone else's dad without anyone ever knowing he did it too. But even with that, he was always so cool and easygoing. Looking into his room once Kushina carried him in, it was pretty bare. It was just as big as his room at home, 8 by 10, and he had a window outside. There was enough space for him to make it his once he knew what he wanted, but for now it was pretty bare bones. There was a sleeping roll, a dresser with a mirror, and that was it. Other than the stuff he'd brought. It was a good thing Minato was so easygoing, because it had allowed him to put up with the way Naruto spoke to him for the last 5 years. There isn't really nothing in here, old man, the little boy said earnestly with a shrug. Minato's eye twitched almost unnoticeably, same as it usually did when this happened. Kushina thought it was funny to teach Naruto to call him old man after he called her mom first, probably because he'd pissed her off sometime around that same time and she wanted to get him back. It worked, and it stuck. As did the rampant disrespect that was somewhat similar to how his mother had treated Minato with before she'd fallen for him. He was more like her than she'd admit out loud, and while she never condoned it, she never admonished him for it either, and she always had a smirk on her face whenever Naruto would act delightfully belligerent. Now Naruto still listened to him like any other son should have and loved him and all that jazz, but he definitely always had known where his bread was buttered, so to speak, and he knew full well who the taskmaster had always been in the house. The angel that gave him life and the devil with red hair was one and the same, and her name just so happened to be Kushina. Try as he might, Minato couldn't get over the old man thing. Maybe 5 years just wasn't long enough to get used to it. I'm only 33. His miserly thoughts came to a close when he felt Naruto tug at his pant leg, getting him to look down into the big old eyes of his only child. God, he looked so much like them it was too much sometimes. What's the matter, little buddy? I don't want you to go, Naruto said quietly, and this was a child that didn't speak softly unless he had to. He was almost as much of a motor mouth as his mother could be. And with that kind of tone, this had to be really getting to him. He already knew that though. Why do you gotta leave? He could explain it all he wanted to the boy, but when it all came down to it, when Naruto would keep asking why, Minato couldn't break it down into terms that a 5-year-old would understand. No matter what they'd say in explanation, Naruto would just keep saying how come, and eventually they'd run out of ways to explain that he'd get. And just saying because that's the way things are wasn't good enough. All he could do was ask his own question. The question he'd asked Naruto the day after his 6th birthday that had started all of this. He stooped down to Naruto's eyes, set his hands right on his shoulders and stared at him. Naruto, do you want to be a ninja? He said with complete weightiness in his voice. And that was it. Naruto rarely heard Minato speak with such severity. Only when he was really in trouble, or when Minato needed him to listen above all else. It was the kind of voice that made Naruto stop cold in his tracks. Even Kushina couldn't make him freeze solid the way Minato could. But he wasn't in trouble at all. This was a father making sure his son was of a clear enough mind to make his own choice. I couldn't be any more serious. Minato continued, his eyes never leaving his son's similar blues. This is the most important decision you're ever going to make, and I know it's not fair to make a child make such a decision, but it's the only time when it can ever be made. It's the most grown-up thing I'm ever going to ask you. He let it sink in for a bit before Naruto nodded to let him know that he understood. If you don't want to do it, just say so, and we'll go home. It'll never come up again, and you can be a regular little boy. Kushina stayed quiet at first. There'd be repercussions for taking Naruto there and then backing off at the last second. They'd probably be punished if such a thing occurred. Maybe Naruto too, but they could try and hurt her baby if they wanted to. Ninja business was ninja business. And if he said he didn't want to be a ninja, they could just bite the bullet, or she'd make them bite something else that was deadly and metal. The Kage Council could kiss her ass if they wound up making a fuss. She and Minato were both jounin, but that mattered not to her. Listen to Minato, Naruto. Neither of us would think badly of you at all if you said no, but you could never be a ninja. We couldn't train you ourselves, or bad things would happen. But this is going to be challenging. Very bad things. The rules of their society were flexible, but they could be extremely strict at certain times, and the ways that one became a ninja were one of the most inflexible for certain reasons. But to Naruto, to never be a ninja? His mother and father were the coolest people in the world to him. The amazing things they could do, the way they seemed to know how to handle everything, prepared for everything. If he was a ninja, he could be like them. Just like them. The allure of being a ninja to someone too young to understand all it entailed was strong. It was how the outside contacts could dazzle parentless children into agreeing to join. Children were very impressionable, and being a ninja was an easy way to impress them. All of the myths, then seeing a few base acrobatics, and bam. But Naruto took his parents' words to heart. They were being honest with him, and that made him want to make them proud even more. The choice was never a choice. He was a big kid, and big kids didn't get scared. I want to be a ninja, old man. Naruto said with a big grin on his face. I'll stay. Minato and Kushina both smiled down at him, and after a few hours that seemed like they couldn't stay for long enough, the sun set and they had to leave Naruto on his own. Giving her baby one last tight squeeze that she didn't want to let go of, Kushina said one last thing to Naruto before they had to go. I know that sometimes this will be hard, and at times it might be scary, but no matter what happens, don't ever let them change who you are. You're my sweetheart, Naruto, and I love you very much. She wiped her eyes behind his back so he didn't see. Now what's your name? Uzumaki Naruto. Who are you? Son of Minato Namikaze and Uzumaki Kushina, Jounin of Konohagakure. And what are you going to do? Be the best ninja ever. Kushina let out a teary laugh at his exuberance. Don't ever forget that, and don't ever lose that. No matter what happens, I love you. Listen to your busybody mother. Minato instructed, joining his wife and son in their hug as he wiped her eyes for her. We both do. As they left their only child in the room, Naruto silently started crying to himself. No one ever heard him make a sound. Outside, as his parents left through the long stone hallway to exit the dorms, his mother never made a sound either, even as tears spilled from her eyes freely as well. Is he going to be okay, Minato? Have a little faith, Kushina. He's our son after all. He'll be fine. Chapter 1, Where do ninjas come from? 10 years later. School. A blond young man with spiky hair said as he walked the hallways of the new high school that he was a first-year student in. I really can't stand this place, you know? I've tried and I know why I'm here's important, but I just can't focus. His posture was a bit easygoing as he held his hands behind his neck to rest his head. Despite the lax clothing policy of the school, he wore most of the uniform that he felt comfortable with. A white short-sleeved button-up shirt that he left untucked with a pair of orange-tinted ski goggles in the pocket and a black book bag over his shoulders, and a pair of blue slacks that drifted down past the backs of his ankles. He didn't want to dress like a total bum even though he could wear whatever he wanted. He had to at least make a little bit of an effort. Walking next to him on the way to find a new spot for lunch was another young man his height with spiky brown hair that reached his neckline and hung a bit in his brown eyes. He was a pretty average kid, and unlike Naruto he wore the entire long-sleeved blue uniform of the school with a yin-yang badge on his chest and carried a one-strap bag over his opposite shoulder. He had a sheepish look on his face at Naruto's nonchalance when it came to his education. Oh, it's not really that bad, Naruto-san. You've just got to find something about it that you like. Like you and your how-to book reading? Yeah, exactly. There you go. Naruto grinned over at his acquaintance and reached out a hand to pat him on the back. You know I've got nothing against reading, Kenichi. When he gave what he thought was a good-natured thump on his friend's back, the boy stumbled forward several steps and had to be grabbed by the back of his collar to stay upright. Whoa. Come on man, brace yourself. Manga doesn't really count as reading, Naruto-san. Kenichi said as Naruto helped him remain upright. Man, this guy really doesn't know his own strength even after a year of knowing him. Yeah, they do. Naruto replied, they could serve as how-to-be awesome books. To Kenichi, Naruto was weird. Flat out weird. There was just no other way to put it. They'd met when they were first years in middle school, but it was really just in passing as classmates. Even back then Naruto had been an odd bird from what he'd seen, but they'd never interacted until the last year of middle school. It was kind of strange, and they were complete opposites for the most part. Kenichi was pretty introverted. He was timid and didn't like rocking the boat with others. He went along to get along for the most part, and he was pretty flaky. Naruto on the other hand was extremely outgoing and had a tendency to be pretty boisterous and brash. He wasn't a shy guy to say the very least. He wasn't very formal or respectful to anyone either, but it didn't seem to be by design, it was just the way he was. He wasn't a mean person, he was actually pretty nice. But he could be blunt to a fault. He always seemed to be staring around at more than what was in front of him. It wasn't a 1,000-yard stare per se, because he was still aware, but he seemed to be looking for more, like there was something that wasn't there. They'd been good friends for about a year and he'd never seen Naruto's home even though Naruto in turn had been to Kenichi's. His family even knew him fairly well. Naruto never invited him to hang out after school or anything. If Kenichi didn't have Naruto's cell phone number, he could honestly say that he probably wouldn't even know how to find the guy outside of school. He tried to tail him once or twice, but he'd see Naruto turn a corner and he'd just disappear into thin air. Even as they found a mostly empty classroom with only one other girl inside studying to sit down in to eat lunch, he was still pondering deeply about his friend. His only friend really. Kenichi wasn't very smooth or cool. He wasn't tough or strong or had a fetching personality. He wasn't handsome. There wasn't anything about him worth noting at all. At least Naruto had a pretty interesting appearance. Mileage may have varied on his facial features since Kenichi wasn't about to judge another man's attractiveness, but even though girls weren't into him either, when you looked at him you found it hard to ignore him. Maybe it was the random goggles he tended to wear from time to time? So that begged the question. Naruto, why are we friends? Naruto had been in the middle of enjoying a nice broth of some sort of soupy concoction from his metal thermos on hand before that question had been sprung on him. He lowered the thermos and swallowed his lunch as he seemed to be looking at Kenichi with both of his eyes closed. Another quirk of his. How did he do that? Naruto said eloquently before shrugging to seemingly nothing. I'm not getting you, comrade. What are you talking about? Kenichi wasn't going to allow that to stop his train of thought. I mean, well, you know what I mean. I'm kind of a loser. Naruto cringed at the ease with which Kenichi could talk himself down. Bullies again? Naruto asked, giving off a sigh when Kenichi didn't answer. You want to know why I'm friends with you, even though you can be a real downer sometimes, and even though a good gust of wind can knock you down on a given day, and even though dash? I get it, Naruto-san. Kenichi deadpanned, feeling about 2 feet tall right then. At least Naruto had the good fortune to look sheepish for shooting his mouth off. Well, even though there's all of that, I'm friends with you because you're a good guy. You're actually a really awesome guy, and you're as good a friend as a guy like me can ask for. And guys like us have gotta stick together. That got him to puff his chest out a bit. He was thinking that Naruto was friends with him because hanging out with the only person in the school definitely seen as a bigger loser than him would deflect all of that sentiment away from him. Oh. I was kind of thinking for a moment that you just hang out with me because I make a good meat shield for the delinquents. What? Of course, not Kenichi. How could you say that? I could never use you as a meat shield. Naruto said, sounding affronted at the mere thought. Effective meat shields can take more than one hit. And just like that the moment was over with and gone. I'm going to go refill my thermos and get a drink. Kenichi said, getting off of one of the desks he'd been sitting on to leave for a bit. I might head back to class early to try and talk to sensei for a bit. Alright man, see you there. Naruto said, getting out a pair of chopsticks from his lunch to begin picking noodles out of his thermos to eat. Conversation aside, today had been pretty good for Kenichi. He and Naruto had finally found a classroom to eat lunch in where someone didn't enter and proceed to emasculate him for kicks. Maybe that could become their regular spot? As Naruto continued to quietly enjoy his homemade food, a trio of second-year students walked in and took account of who was in the room before shutting the door. They sneered at Naruto and figured they could deal with him next if he didn't take the hint and get scared off from the warning they were about to give the fairer denizen of the room. Like Naruto, they didn't wear the school uniform, but they didn't even bother half-assing trying to look presentable, looking more like run-of-the-mill street thugs than anything else. Hey, get out! One of the brutes said to the other girl sitting in the room minding her own business studying. This is the place we go to during lunch. Has been all year. If you ain't looking to have a bit of fun, just get on up and step off. The way they surrounded the girl's desk immediately alarmed her, and the fact that the only other person in the room was some nondescript blonde kid that had been eating with the scrawny brown-haired guy only made it worse. He wasn't going to be any help, but lunch is over in 5 minutes and this is my classroom. Well, if lunch is over in 5 minutes, this isn't your classroom for the next 5 minutes. Another boy said, dropping his hands right in the middle of her book before ripping through half of one of the pages. Heh, who studies during lunch anyway? Get a boyfriend. No, stop. Those are expensive. Wrong place, wrong time I guess. The third one said as he grabbed her by her arm and tried to pull her out of her seat to shove her on out. A sharp whistle directed their attention back to Naruto, who was still sitting on the desk with his eyes closed. I don't think she likes being touched, he said, holding his drink that he'd gotten earlier from a vending machine. You guys should probably just go and get back to class, it's kind of late. A chuckle came up from one of the boys as he let go of the girl's arm and let her be in exchange for the meat that had actually started raising a stink. And just what happens in this fantasy world of yours if we don't just run off? He gestured to the tall aluminum can in Naruto's hand. You'll kill us with your coffee can? The others started chuckling at that, making fun of Naruto's cheap-looking container. It's green tea actually. The laughter stopped. What was that? Naruto didn't mince words. I'll kill you with my tea can. The first boy that spoke clenched his fists until one of his running buddies set a hand on his shoulder to get his attention. Hey, we've got 3 minutes before anyone else'll come in here. Why not? With a grin spreading on his face he moved down the aisle where Naruto was and started running at him in case he smartened up and tried to run away. Naruto did not run away. Quicker than anyone could have anticipated, Naruto jumped up and stuck the can longways onto the attacker's forehead before punching it and crushing it with a metallic crunch, knocking him back down the aisle cleanly on his back, out cold. His friends recoiled in shock and got into hunched postures to prepare and fight Naruto, who sat back down with his bag and his lunch. Instead of doing or saying anything else, Naruto reached back into his bag and pulled out an extremely worn and small, but still very sharpened pencil that he sat directly on the table right next to him while he stared directly at them both, not opening his eyes the entire time. It was the standoff that wasn't as within 10 seconds they had grabbed up their code friend and left the room in a hurry. As they reached the door, Naruto cleared his throat to get them to stop. At this he opened his eyes to reveal alarmingly bright blue eyes staring at them like a jaguar did its prey. Nobody has to know that I beat you up. I won't tell if you won't. They said nothing, but they just kept going, shutting the door behind them in case he gave chase as if it would slow him down. Everything's a weapon. Naruto thought to himself as he pocketed his pencil back and started packing up his lunch. I wouldn't really have killed those guys, but they didn't need to know that. he muttered to himself before getting up to leave. Wait. The girl from before said just as he reached the door, "Thank you, senpai." Is there anything I can do to repay you, senpai? She was a first year, just like him from the look of her. With a snap of his fingers, Naruto gave her a big grin. Yeah. He then put a finger to his lips and mimicked a shush. Could you keep that a secret? I don't run with any gangs, and don't really have any friends to get my back. I don't need that kind of tough guy attention. Don't want to get beat up, you know. Not much of a fighter? Right. The slightly skeptical girl just nodded, eventually guessing that Naruto had lucked out and didn't want word to get out so even more people might look for him to get revenge. Even so, she owed him and wouldn't tell anyone what happened later. Reassured by the girl, Naruto went along his way just as the bell rang to end lunch. Later that day, city streets. Hey, Naruto-san, what do you think about joining the school's karate club with me? Kenichi asked Naruto as they walked home from school. After lunch, when Naruto had returned to their classroom, he found Kenichi with his clothes more disheveled than they had been when he'd left him. He didn't say anything about it, so Naruto didn't bring it up. I mean, we're required to join a club anyway and you haven't done it yet. Who knows, we might get strong. Naruto said, not sounding very enthused at all at the prospect of joining that club. Not much of a fan of people trying to beat me to a pulp. Which was what happened to Kenichi in that club. Every day, half of the bullies in the school are in the karate club Kenichi. I think you should think that one through a bit more and switch out. I know what it looks like. Kenichi admitted, but I can't quit and just prove that I'm weak. If I'm a club member and admit I'm beneath them, eventually they'll teach me, right? For once, instead of people just trying to beat him up, at least he'd get something out of it. Teaching and learning karate was the point of the club, wasn't it? I don't know. Naruto said as he affixed his goggles around his head on his forehead to keep his bangs out of his eyes. Shouldn't you join a club with stuff you actually like in it? Nothing in the school was appealing enough for him to take an interest in. I like the martial arts. Kenichi defended, you know I've always been interested in them. I've never seen you throw a single punch at anything ever though. Naruto replied bluntly, besides, you'd be better off trying out for a real dojo. School clubs like that are notoriously top-heavy, aren't they? The concept went over average young man's head as he didn't really get what Naruto was referring to. I don't get you. I mean, it's like one guy that actually knows what they're doing dash. Explained Naruto, squinting his eyes in concentration as he kept thinking of a way to get his point across, but only because they're a sucky bottom-tier guy at a real dojo. You won't get strong there. That was kind of mean. Kenichi pointed out, why would you say that? Those guys seemed pretty hard to him. If he didn't have headgear when they used him as a punching bag, he'd shudder to think of what he'd look like. It's an assumption, but it's got some merit. Naruto said, our school's not even nationally ranked for karate. They don't try to compete in tournaments. It's just a club for punks to hang out, punch stuff, and talk about other times that they hung out and punched stuff. They're just jerks. Well, do you know about any good dojos for karate? Ah hee hee. The blonde student laughed a bit sheepishly before pulling his goggles down over his face to hide his eyes. New. He drawled out in a long, unsure manner, not for just karate. Come to think of it, Kenichi probably shouldn't have been surprised that Naruto didn't have any interest in getting involved with fighting. Naruto never seemed to ever get riled up enough to come to blows with anyone. He never stood up to fight with people that tried to mess with either of them, instead just smiling his big grin and trying to talk a situation down. It was surprisingly effective. It worked more times to ease tensions than a few when he didn't stick his foot in his mouth, but it didn't show a lot for his backbone. He never ran from anything, but then again, he never ran toward anything either. Sometimes though, every blue moon Naruto would turn up in school looking like he'd taken quite the beatdown, but like him he never said anything about it, even though he'd never seen Naruto get hit. He couldn't really say anything about Naruto and his backbone or lack thereof when he himself was about as spineless as a jellyfish. Without warning, Naruto turned off down a street that he usually didn't see Naruto take. Hey, where are you going? He was certain that Naruto didn't live that way. I've got something to go do before I go home. Naruto said, waving of his shoulder as he left Kenichi behind. I'll see you tomorrow in class. Kenichi had a mind to try and follow him again to see just what his soul friend got up to on his own time, but he'd never even get close to wherever Naruto was going before he'd know he was being followed and would lose him in a heartbeat. Honestly, the guy was like a shadow sometimes. Elsewhere in town, A teenage boy with a placid expression on his face walked down the street in a residential neighborhood with a yawn as he neared his apartment complex. He wore a black school uniform and had one hand lazily shoved into his pocket while the other carried his bag over his shoulder. School was a drag like always, he thought to himself as he ran a hand through his black hair that was kept in an upright spiky ponytail, but it beats the hell out of the homeland, that's for sure. Oh, don't be that way, Shikamaru. There were some good times back there too. Upon hearing that voice, the boy let out a great sigh and directed his attention up to the landing of the floor that his apartment was on, and fought with himself about going upstairs to deal with that troublesome person. But he was standing in the way of him reaching his bed so that he could take a nice long nap into the night before he could go back to sleep later. So he had to go up, and up the stairs he went, greeted by the grinning face of Uzumaki Naruto. Shikamaru said as if someone had told him that he'd gotten a parking ticket. Back again? You could at least act like you're happy to see me, just a little bit. Naruto said as he followed Shikamaru to his apartment door. We're the only point of contact for the other, but that doesn't matter. You know I come back every single week. Let's go inside so we can talk about the mission. No need. I already know what you're going to ask, and it's the same answer I gave you last week, and the week before, and every week before this for the last 4 years. Shikamaru said. Even though he didn't think Naruto to be the type, he wasn't about to open his door with his back turned to anyone. They were trained better than that. Even if he did his best to forget it, there's no messages. There's no new mission for you or me. There's never a new mission. We've got the same one they sent us off the island with and nothing else to supplement it. No new or rescinded objectives, it's the same damn thing. You shouldn't talk about that out here in the open. Naruto said with a frown on his face, and that mission is hard. I can't think of a way to do it. I've tried everything I can think of. What about you? That's because it's impossible for a genin. We're not supposed to pass it. They never wanted us to pass it. Shikamaru would have palmed his face if he didn't have a modicum of pity for the poor bastard. He wanted to scream it in his face, to spell out for him something that his faith in their culture wouldn't let him see for himself. But that was cruel. Crueler than Shikamaru was willing to be for no other reason than to crush a man's soul, and he wouldn't do that. One day he hoped Naruto would see the truth the way he did before it killed him. But maybe Naruto would rather die believing in something than live for nothing. Smoothing a hand through his hair, Naruto pulled out his cell phone to check what time it was. Well, I'm going to be trying something again tonight. If the stars align, maybe I can finally finish this mission so I can wait for my next one. Don't worry about it. Shikamaru said before walking into his apartment, leaving Naruto outside. Just go home, Naruto. If you try it again, the same thing's going to happen as always. The truth that he saw the moment they were placed on that boat to leave the island that trained them, the truth that almost broke him after the first time they tried, failed, and he'd subsequently accepted it and quit. The truth that they weren't special. They didn't have something that the other students lacked. Instead, they sorely lacked something that the other students actually had in the minds of the Kage Council. In Shikamaru's case it had been belief, drive, and motivation. In Naruto's case it was different. He believed in Konohagakure, but they thought he was too empathetic, an occurrence in his life affecting him too negatively to recover from in their view. Being called upon to leave the homeland island early wasn't an honor that meant you were ready for life as a functional ninja. They were sent away before their training was complete, given an impossible task for the pair of them that they could never complete. And the reason was simple. Because they were never expected to complete it. Ever, Naruto, even if you get in there and get out with what you need, there's nowhere to take it to. Don't you see? There wasn't even a way to turn in their results. They didn't know how to get to the island by design unless you were a jounin, and they took great pains to make sure of such, especially on the way out. They were told that someone would find and contact them, but neither had heard a peep in 4 years. No attempts to check on their progress or if they were still alive. Konohagakure had washed their hands of them because they thought that they weren't up to snuff. They were sent away to wash out and die. And they couldn't even do that right. Later that night, night had fallen, and Naruto had only made a quick stop home to grab some stuff such as a change of clothes and some other things before heading back out. He walked down the sidewalks at a reserved pace, slow and deliberate as he carried himself to his intended destination with the same kind of gait that he used to see his father use when he was a very little boy. There was no need to rush to where he was going. No matter when he showed up, it'd still be the same as it always was. Man, that was negative. He always used to wonder why his father, a man he knew for a fact was faster than his eyes could see, would most often move so slowly, so deliberately, when he didn't have to, but now he was beginning to get the reason why. At least he thought so. He couldn't ask. There wasn't anyone to ask. Mind off of that. Naruto thought to himself as he was nearing the insertion point to begin his mission. He could tell because he'd done these enough times that his body knew this portion of town by heart and already knew to dread it. But he'd never back off. This is your mission. Your first mission. You have to complete it. No matter how many tries you need. No matter how long it takes. Trying to pump himself up with his own ongoing inner mantra, Naruto took several rapid breaths and looked down at his feet before breaking out in a run once he saw that the streets and sidewalks were clear. He needed the streets to be clear before he started running, as he couldn't let anyone see him moving that fast. Eventually, a patch of land that had a 15-foot wall erected around the entire property came into view, and right at the front of it was a large gate that was twice as tall, with a pair of iron doors too thick and heavy for a normal person to open. That's fine, he thought to himself, pulling a rope and grappling hook from his bag that he used to reach the tallest building in the nearby area. It would give him a decent view into his target grounds. Laying down on the rooftop in question, on his belly as he peered over that wall and took account of everything he was seeing, he pulled his goggles down over his eyes and took into account his change of clothes from what he'd been wearing earlier that day. His pants were black and had the bottoms of them placed inside of black high-top shoes to keep any loose articles of clothing from trailing. He wore a regular form-fitting long-sleeved black t-shirt that was tucked into his belt enough to work similarly to his pants, no loose articles. He looked normal enough to walk around casually without scrutiny, but it was as functional as he needed it to be for what he was doing. Tonight's the night, he thought to himself, doing a little prayer just in case something went wrong. Again, after all of these years, and all of those kickings, this is the night I finally infiltrate Ryuzanpaku, the dojo of the strongest. This time will be the charm. I'll make it in and complete my mission of dash. Oops. Well, no he wouldn't, because there was already the noticeably heavy weight of a sword against the base of his spine. You, again? At the sound of that very calm, dull, almost bored-sounding female voice, Naruto felt a shiver go down his spine but didn't make any sudden moves. No. I didn't even make it over the wall this time? I've been training my ass off for this try. Actually, he didn't move at all. Not a muscle. No, he wasn't going to make any sudden moves here. He'd walked that far in the snow before and he didn't like the destination that would await him one bit. He felt a slender, smooth finger poke him in the side of the head several times as if trying to get him to react somehow, but he didn't budge. Not even his eyes moved off of the sight of Ryuzanpaku. He didn't need to look to see who it was. It was the only denizen of the dojo that ever bothered trying to sneak up on him when they caught him, and he used the word trying loosely since he doubted she was really trying at all. And this woman wasn't a ninja? She might as well have been. He didn't need to see what she looked like, because he already knew. She was a tall and extremely gorgeous young lady several years older than him, very well endowed in Naruto's opinion with emotionless purple eyes. Her dark hair trailed down her back in one long ponytail tied with pink string ribbon. She had purple stockings that traveled halfway up her thighs and simple sandals to go with a pink loose-sleeved kimono, with a very long nodachi in her hand that hadn't been poking his skull, bandages covering the hilt. Naruto was very intimate with it, one could say. And she'd been the first master of Ryuzanpaku he'd had a run-in with. Kusaka Shigeru, the prodigy of sword and the mistress of all weaponry. The first time he'd ever even come to Ryuzanpaku when he was 12, he'd tried to sneak in over the wall, and she cut him from waist to shoulder before he'd even gotten used to his settings. She didn't kill him though. She just kicked his unconscious body out of the front gate. And once again, she was pointing a sword at his spine. "What is your name?" she said, finally standing up directly over top of Naruto as she held him at blade point. "You don't sound like you care that much," he eventually said, knowing that she didn't take him as enough of a threat to do anything as long as he remained still. "I don't care, at all," the woman freely admitted, "but you have been trying to break in for years now." How many times had it been at this point? 50? More? There had to be something that he was after, and, "We don't know your name." Naruto was expecting to get his ass kicked more upon being discovered. He usually did. Every single time he'd ever tried to get inside of Ryuzanpaku he got caught and then he got destroyed when he tried to run. No, destroyed wasn't the right word. He got annihilated. But that was what you got when you picked with master-level martial artists. But Ryu Zanpaku were absolute monsters. They never killed him though, or had him arrested. They would put him down hard, and fast. Oh, so fast. And then they'd chuck him out over the wall into the shrubs outside, where he'd wake up the next morning and go home, or to school depending on what day it was. Kenichi would always stare so much at the damage he showed up with, as did a lot of others, but at least the guy was willing to respect certain points of his privacy and he never asked about it. He oftentimes thought about why the Konohagakure organization would send a pair of newbie ninjas to do a mission like this, and Shikamaru kept trying to convince him to let it go. But he couldn't. He wouldn't. How could he do something like that? Run away from his very first mission, even if it seemed impossible for him? His parents never did, and he wouldn't either. They had been amazing ninjas, and he would be too. Konohagakure believed in him and Shikamaru enough to send them away earlier than any other student in their age group, by themselves, to tackle such a difficult assignment. I believe in myself. Naruto thought to himself, despite being pinned down with no foreseeable way to counter. Maybe this time he had something up his sleeve that could overcome one of them. Don't ever let them change who you are. The moment his muscles twitched to make a move, the woman above him rendered him unconscious with a single stroke of her blade's blunt side. She just stood over him and stared at Naruto's body before shrugging to herself and jumping from their perch on the biggest building on the block, clearing 3 other houses and the entire street before she soared over the walls of Ryo Zanpaku to return from whence she came. And there Naruto remained on the rooftop, where he would slumber until daybreak. Flashback, 7 years ago. Though the time flew by, the routine remained the same. School for ninjas in training was pretty uniform. For the young ones like Naruto, they were taught elementary things that they would have learned in normal schools for kids. Reading, language, geography, general history, math and science, and culture, the latter being the favorite class for pretty much every student because it involved a lot of TV and movies, and anything that would let them understand what was to be expected of normal people outside of the island. The reason for the existence of the culture class being that even though the kids were isolated for the privacy of their organization, they would not send their trainees out into the world ignorant. They would know as much as they could of the world and how to act in it, as it could and would keep them alive and help them complete their missions. Contrary to popular belief, ninjas actually liked their ilk to have personalities. Being as rigid as a board and unemotional raised too many red flags. Being normal and blending in was the best way to go about with any assignment. Aside from that, the children also got physical conditioning. Quite a lot of it. A healthy ninja was a strong ninja after all. Winding down from their afternoon PT sessions, the children were being put through their final paces of the day in the forested courtyard provided for their entire class to learn in and day out. A man with brown hair up in a ponytail and a scar across his nose stood dressed in the white ninja attire of the Shinobi Shizoku that was only really used and worn at the homeland island, only required to be worn during official training as a uniform. It was the stereotypical ninja outfit, but in all white, with no loose articles of clothing whatsoever, along with tabi socks and sandals. The children wore the same outfit, but in black. At the front of a gathering of students all facing him, he stood calmly breathing in and out as he watched the 29-year-olds all do the same. Classes were separated by age, as by the time they turned 15 they would be sent out into the world or given the option to stay. Those ninjas that stayed would be the standing force in case the island needed to be defended. They also tended to the land, the school grounds, the children, and other responsibilities as their official jobs and were clothed in white uniforms. It was easier than going out into the world, but you didn't get to leave really at all. All right, the man said, giving a signal for the kids to be at ease for a moment. Okay, today we're going to start preparing you for the year-end tests to mark your progress and see what you all need work on respectively if you ever want to pass by the time coming of age occurs. So we'll do a quick run-through for each of you to make sure you'll know what's expected of you this time. It'll be harder than last year's, so prepare well. Am I understood? Yes, Iraka-sensei. All of the students, both male and female, sounded off at once. A smile came to his face at that and he continued on, now we're going to pick on all of you a little bit, one row at a time. All of the students tensed up, as it was going to be something surprising. It always was. Whenever they were told they were about to be picked on by one of the instructors, that usually meant that something random was about to happen and they had to react accordingly or get called out for it. Thus, the first row of kids moved forward and stood straight up, waiting for the start. Without warning or a movement from Irika, a row of blunted shuriken, one for each of the 5 children in the front row, flew right at them. Without a sound or any other prompting, each child in that row immediately crouched down low enough to avoid it and pulled out a blunted training kunai, sat down in a posture to defend themselves with their eyes darting around suspiciously to analyze the entire forested courtyard. Irika said nothing, but he nodded in approval. Preparing to defend oneself was the appropriate course of action in such a situation. That was basic, learning how to respond to a mystery threat. Do not panic under duress. Do not move in a random direction, otherwise you might fall prey to where your opponent wished for you to be steered. Irika lifted his hands and began moving his fingers around, raising up a great maze of metal wires that he'd prepared well in advance and connected to his fingers just before talking about the exercise they were about to do. The movement allowed the wire to become visible to the students as a warning, "Reach me," he said. At that his fingers started to dance around and the children were then forced to dodge the shifting wires without being caught up in them and dangling. 2 ninjas in training were caught shortly while 3 others took their time and worked their way through the maze without moving slow enough to touch any of them. Touching real stretched out metal ninja wire was as good as cutting yourself. It was razor sharp. Eventually they worked their way through with great effort and reached the end, all tired from the constant movement and the adrenaline of not wanting to get caught. As the last thing, Irika pulled out a small decorative bell and gave it a jingle before smiling. "Get this bell from me if you can," he said in a challenging voice. 2 of the ninja children immediately sprang into action while one stood back and did nothing. One with black spiky hair and black eyes, the other with thin red hair and freckles. It didn't take Irika long to get rid of one of them. While he dodged the first's attempt at a sliding kick tackle, the second came straight on, planning to use the distraction of the first attack and his hands to fight with. Not a bad tactic against someone on your level, but he was a chunin, and these weren't even close to genin. He simply sank his fist into the child's belly harshly, dropping him to the ground, breathlessly sucking air. The second child was a bit harder to get rid of. For a 9-year-old he fought furiously. A little boy with black upright hair's eyes blazed over with determination to take that bell, alternating between attacking with punches and kicks and reaching for the bell when he thought he'd worked his way to it. Eventually though, he overextended himself reaching for a bell in a bluff of Irika's and got bopped on the head with the bottom of his fist hard enough to scatter his brains and knock him to the ground too. Good intensity, Sasuke, but your first attack was too advanced. Your technique was good though, but without developing the speed for using it a strong opponent would not fall for it, Irika said as the boy he just bopped got up and walked to the other students to get to the back of the line. His onyx eyes shone in acknowledgement of the compliment. "John, work on your approach. Don't telegraph a move coming in," Irika said to the other boy that had tried to fight him. He said nothing to the third boy, the one that had not fought him to begin with. All he did was gesture with his head for him to go to the back of the line. "Naruto, you're done." Naruto smiled slightly and rubbed his hair before doing just that. As he moved to the back of the line, he could hear a lot of the other students whispering about how he didn't try to take the bell because he knew Irika would have beaten him up too. And how Naruto hoped to get good marks if he didn't believe in his hand-to-hand well enough to spar with the teacher during class. Once he got to his place at the back of line back in their original rows as the next group went through Irika's random tests, Sasuke sent him a momentary smirk, but when Naruto turned to look at him he was already facing the front again. Naruto narrowed his eyes at him and at everything everyone else was saying, his cheeks stained red with embarrassment, but he just shook his head and didn't say a thing. From a distance up amongst the trees, 2 of the eldest ninjas on the island stood in hiding, watching the next generation of Konohagakure ninjas learning their art. A man in a black kimono with spiky, balding gray hair and liver spots on his face looked down with a smile. "Did you see that, Danzo? The boy that didn't fight?" Danzo responded. He was also quite old, with spiky black hair, bandages covering one eye while the other stayed closed, a cane in one hand and the other in a sling and thick cast. Yes, he was the only one in his group that passed all of the trials. His teacher never told that they needed to take the bell, only to do it if they could. None of them would have been able to. A ninja does not engage in combat when there is no need. Hiruzen said as if reciting a rule, violence is saved for only when necessary. Most younglings are so quick to resort to trying to show their skills to get what they need when there at times is no reason for such a thing. They will learn though. Danzo said in return, "They are just now beginning to learn the basics of our way. It will come in time." "But that one is already very advanced, is he not?" The boy that stayed back? Yes. Naruto is his name, I believe. Second generation ninja on his father's side, seventh generation on his mother's. Both of them jounin, and his father's near being issued Kage status like you and I? Kage was the most powerful class of ninja available. The system went that all ninjas deemed good enough to begin working were given the rank of genin. From there a promotion to chunin was possible, pending enough support from others of the same ranking after more experience and skill was garnered. The same went for jounin, only longer and more difficult. A Kage was rare. The best of the best. The highest level achievable. All Kage-level ninjas remained on Homeland Island, with a place for them reserved on the council that governed the entire organization. There were currently only 13 members serving at the lofty position, and most of them were over the age of 50. Namikaze? Danzo said with a touch of astonishment in his bland voice, he's rather young for such a consideration, isn't he? As a man with no background in his family before him of being a shinobi, that is extremely impressive. How that man ended up with someone like Uzumaki Kushina was beyond him. She was an incredible ninja, but her personality as a ninja was not what they wished. The way she did things walked the line of acceptance within their clan. Hopefully she didn't pass that down her lineage to her son. His son seems to be shaping up as well, but we may be getting ahead of ourselves. Hiruzen said. A positive mindset in regards to the children they were training was always what was needed of those that came before them. A grin then appeared on his face. I wonder if he thought to ask for the bell nicely. End flashback. His dreams from the past broken, Naruto returned to the land of the conscious amid sharp pokes to his side. He cracked his blue orbs open to find them filled with morning sunlight. So, he got knocked out again. That woman with the weapons was just too fast. Not that he'd had a good position to begin fighting from to begin with. If he'd have been standing, he'd have made a real fight of it. Oh, who was he kidding? He'd have gotten taken out just as quickly if he'd been facing her at the ready. The only difference would have been that he might have seen her take her first few steps before he lost track of her and she put him to sleep just as decisively. It's time to wake up Ninja-kun. A bright and cheerful girl's voice said as she continued to try and prod him awake, I heard from Shigure-san that you tried to break in again last night. What do you want from us anyway? Maybe if you told us you wouldn't have to do, well, this. MMMPH. Naruto moaned without opening his mouth as he turned his head to face the person messing with him. Huh. Ryuzanpakuheim. I haven't seen you in a while. Said Ryuzanpaku Princess was a lovely teenage girl Naruto's age with long blonde hair and bright blue eyes and a beauty mark under her left eye. For some reason her hair was plaited into a single braid to go along with the two purple clips she wore to keep it out of her face, which was odd because it was loose every other time he'd seen her. He didn't want his eyes to drift any lower than her face out of respect because if he did he would have wound up staring. Her body was absolutely stunning. Grown women would kill to have a full figure like hers. Said figure was clad in a blazer for some kind of school uniform and a plaid patterned skirt. An absolutely adorable pout came to her face after hearing what Naruto called her and she poked him several more times slightly harsher than before. My name is Mio Ninja-kun. Furinji Mio. You know that. Of course, I do. He did. But it didn't feel right to be so familiar with someone that he was trying to take something from, especially since she already knew that he was. Then again, she was the only Ryuzanpaku denizen that had never knocked him out within the time frame of 5 seconds. And I still don't know yours. Mio said, crossing her arms and pushing her chest out as she continued to sit on her knees next to him, after 4 years. Oh, don't be like that. Naruto replied, wiggling his arms and legs enough to make sure Shigure hadn't paralyzed him when she'd hit him in the neck to knock him out. Who tries to be friends with the ninja trying to get over on them? We've fought how many times again? 10 times. Mio supplied with a helpful smile. A confused look came over Naruto's face at that. No way. I figured it would have been way more than that. I've run into you like 6 times by yourself trying to break into your house. Furrowing her brow in thought, Mio eventually pounded into one hand out of realization. Oh. You're counting all the times you ran away and hid. Well, that would make it 14, but some of those don't count for what we did, silly. And that chapped Naruto's hide. Yes, he ran away sometimes while they had been fighting. It was a perfectly sound tactic, and it had led to some of his more dominant victories over her when he'd actually trapped her or turned the tables several times. But the only times he had ever hidden when he'd been in the middle of a fight with her was not because of her. It was because of the monster that showed up every single time he started winning. You think it would be that easy to take advantage of the masters of Ryuzanpaku and my granddaughter? Now he wasn't afraid of anything, or anything that he would readily admit to, but her grandfather was fucking terrifying. She descended from him? No way, not that cute little thing. Not from him, not at all. Naruto would not accept that as a reality, because her grandfather was by far the most horrifying master inside of Ryuzanpaku. And without fail, no matter what, whenever Mio wound up being the one trying to deal with him and couldn't defeat him herself, if he started winning, if he had her on the ropes and was preparing to subdue her so he could keep on going, her gigantic demigod of a grandfather would show up and smoke him on sight. Even if their fight hadn't made a hint of a ruckus by the time he found them, he could run from the man the second he saw him. His foot wouldn't touch the ground in the opposite direction one time before everything went dark and he woke up with more injuries than he could ever remember having. All he could do was turtle and hope he landed somewhere comfortable after he was punted out, because if the invincible Superman Furinji Hayato was the master that got to him, he wouldn't wind up just outside of the walls in the shrubs or just down the block. It was like the man had a sixth sense for knowing whenever anyone was screwing with Mio. Or was it just him? Either way, the best option when she was the one that confronted him on Ryuzanpaku grounds was usually to just run from her, because even at times when he actually could beat her or had a trap planned, he never seemed to win fast enough to escape a secondary asswhopping. When they fought, she was a fierce enemy. The fiercest he'd ever fought, that didn't destroy him outright. Outside of the walls, like now, she was an absolute delight. Really easy to talk to. Such a sweet girl. It was like she didn't acknowledge the fact that he was an enemy outside, which was probably partially his fault too, since he was just as affable outside of his mission. Well, I should go to school right now, but my head is killing me, so I think I'll just lay here and try to think of a new way to get into Ryuzanpaku before I go home, Naruto said rather nonchalantly for speaking to the person whose home he was going to try and infiltrate. Good luck with that. Mio chirped brightly, patting him on the head. Speaking of school, I have to go to class now. I'm starting at a new school I transferred to today. Killer. Naruto said earnestly with a thumbs up, I hope it goes well. He then noticed something that stood out about how she looked. What's with the glasses? He had fought against her a bunch of times. He knew full well that she had perfect vision and did not need them. Just trying to avoid attention and look normal. Ah, I gotcha. And he really did. Well, bye Haim. Bye. See you later Ninja-kun. Weird. Were they friends? Nah, he was trying to take something important from within Ryuzanpaku's walls. You couldn't be friends with someone that lived in the place you were trying to burgle, even if you were cordial with each other. They were more like rivals. Kind of. He would go in, sometimes she'd try to stop him. If she couldn't stop him or never discovered him during his mission attempts, another master would. That was how it always went no matter what he tried, even if they had conversations if he ran into her on the way to the store or on the street or whatnot. Sometime later, Naruto's house. The front door to the modest two-story home opened up as Naruto walked in and kicked off his shoes in the necessary space. PSSHT, I put on my wall-climbing shoes and I didn't get past the front gate this time. Naruto thought to himself, dropping his bag in the same area. I'm home. He was speaking to himself though. There wasn't anyone else there but him. As he walked through the foyer, his eyes drifted to some of the pictures in the wall that he hadn't touched since Kanahagakure had sent him on his first mission and the day he moved back into the house he and his parents shared until he was sent off to train on Homeland Island for years and years. His mother and father. He just liked keeping those pictures up even though they weren't with him any longer. He was in a lot of them as a small child, and they all looked happy. They did love him. They left him everything. Their house, all of their money, which was quite enough for him to live off of until he graduated and went to college, if he wound up going, and more. Going upstairs into his room, he walked in and sat down on his bed, eyes flickering to several composition notebooks that were basically filled from cover to cover. Those were the things that made him feel fuzziest when he thought of what they'd left him. They were filled with training ideas and programs that they were planning to put him through upon his return. It made him smile. There was so much meant to keep him busy even after they'd sent him off to college. Because they believed in him. Even if no one else did, they did. They were willing to die for their duty as ninjas, and in their place, he'd go on and be everything they were and more. If Ryuzampaku's masters kept on beating him and kicking him out, he'd train harder. He didn't have to fight them, he just had to find a way to get past them and search for his objective. He'd be the Kage his father was supposed to become, and he'd do it the way they told him to. His way. Defeat wasn't going to make him back off and change who he was. He promised them he wouldn't. The last promise he'd made them in person. Flashback, 7 years ago, Naruto's day had been extremely strange. Actually, things had been rather strange for quite some time now. Ever since he'd first come to Homeland Island, his parents had made good on their promise to write him frequently. It almost bugged him non-stop how many letters he'd received from them, asking him about any and everything. They told him that they knew of his grades and that they were mostly very good. Kushina did constantly get on him about improving on his science and math, even though she did like preening about the fact that he owned all of the culture classes with an iron fist. Minato didn't really like Naruto's little rivalry with the fellow top student in his age bracket in Uchiha Sasuke, but he did encourage Naruto that if he was going to compete, he should kick his ass. Though that was probably something Kushina wrote in. They sent him packages and had even managed to send him a TV and a PlayStation for him to occupy his time when he was by himself for his performance in his classes. It was a big hit with the other kids and got him some popularity. They always told him when they'd be visiting and always came to see him once in the summer, once in the winter, and once on his birthday. They never missed a beat. Which was what the problem was now. His birthday had been a week ago, and his parents kept writing that they were excited to go and visit him on October 10th. October 10th, October 10th, October 10th, in every letter he'd received from August to September. But at the start of September, he stopped getting letters. Cold turkey, they just stopped coming in. He thought it might be because of storms, as boat was the only way for anything to get to and from the island, but then October 10th came and went, and they didn't come. But they were probably busy. On top of being high-class ninjas, Kushina and Minato had real jobs too. Important jobs. Something probably just came up. So why did his heart feel like it was tugging downward in dread? To add on to that, his teachers hadn't been addressing him normally the way they had before. Even Irika, who had been his favorite of the rotating instructors, made him feel like something was off. A knock came at Naruto's door while he was just leaning on his windowsill, staring out at the ocean through the trees. He had a great view, it's open. Speaking of the devil, Irika opened the door and popped his head in, looking around to make sure there weren't any other kids in Naruto's room before he went in and closed the door behind himself. He needed to tell him something that the others didn't have any business hearing before he did. Hey Naruto. I need to tell you something. It's important, and it's about your parents. They're coming? Naruto turned around so fast Irika had to blink and make sure he'd seen him even move, or are they here? His face lit up at the thought, which damn near crushed his heart to see, but he was a ninja. Naruto was a ninja. They all dealt with this kind of thing eventually. And he needed to know, they're not coming Naruto. Now or ever again. The shock and confusion on his face would shortly give way to complete horror. Uzumaki Kushina and Namake's Minato are both dead. I'm sorry for your loss. Irika just stood there for the longest time watching the stone-cold frozen expression on Naruto's face. It made him cringe at the sight of it. And then tears started rolling down his cheeks as he stared up at his teacher. They were dispatched on a mission, a very sensitive infiltration mission, and they didn't make it. Irika explained to a petrified Naruto, seemingly frozen in time, I don't want to be the one to tell you something like this Naruto, but they died doing what you're training to do now. We're proud of them and you should be too. I'm so sorry. That was all he could repeat until he left the room and left Naruto alone. Once again Naruto cried, but this time sounds did come from his room. In the dead of night, the sound of punches impacting off of a stone wall and soft uncontrolled sobbing emanated from his quarters. And from that day forward everything else went downhill too, whether he knew it or not. Chapter 2, When You're In. Flashback, 4 years prior. This occurrence had been happening a lot for the last 3 years since the death of Naruto's parents. He would be held back after class to talk to one of his instructors. He hadn't been hovering around top dog status for years and he knew it, but he still trained his tail off. It didn't change anything for him though. He'd keep going. It was all he could do for his parents after they died before seeing just how great he could be. He'd have to shine so brightly they could see him from wherever they were. Today the instructor that kept him back was Irika. The man was pretty much his favorite, but he still looked at Naruto with the same disappointed expression that the other instructors had done for a while now. He'd been the last to do so though, and he'd always been the one to try and converse with him like this. To try and help him. Naruto, Irika said in the empty forest courtyard that served as the physical training classroom for their age group, tell me how I can help you. You know I'm here to help. Tell me what you think I can do that'll bring you back. Oh, come on. He wasn't that bad off at all, Irika-sensei. I don't know. 12-year-old Naruto said with a shrug, I mean, I am getting it. I'm passing everything. I'm passing everything well. Talk to one of the kids that aren't passing the tests. Hell, I'm top of the class in the culture stuff. And it showed in his speech and the way he acted. He was great in that class. Naruto really was almost like a city kid. It wasn't about the technical tests though. When it came to the tests, Naruto could be as golden as his hair. He got the gist of the lessons to pass, understood enough of what was being taught, and could explain it well enough. It wasn't a matter of drive, because he had that also. He had it in spades. He wouldn't stop training at something until he could put it into use somehow. He understood the basics and even intermediate aspects of ninjutsu. Understanding only went so far though. It was the practical application where he tanked, and no one knew why. It made no sense. He was so strange in the way he went about things. When it came time to put what he knew into action, something always went wrong. He just couldn't excel in the field. Today was a prime example. Students had been matched one-on-one, head-to-head, in separate areas of the island's woods to find and subdue the other. A search and destroy kind of affair. Naruto had his opposition dead to rights, without them knowing where he was. He had him. It shouldn't even have turned into a head-up fight, and in an outright reversal of fortune, he'd somehow let his opponent off the hook, revealed his location, and they wound up fighting directly until Irika stepped in. Even his opponent for the day in Sasuke looked disappointed. All of that potential from before, and then what happened to Kushina and Minato before they taught the children how to deal with death? Look! Naruto said, getting up off of the forested floor as he wiped his uniform off, I know I muffed up today's exercise the way it was laid out. But there's more than one way to do this stuff, right? Of course. So why can't I try to come up with my own way? You didn't even let me get started. You guys never let me get started. Naruto said with a bit of disgruntlement in his voice. He had a plan. If only Irika had given him the time to try and pull it off. Freestyling wasn't really a part of the curriculum though, as Irika tried to express, there's a reason we're teaching you what we teach to begin with. You can't just fly off the cuff. We're making sure you understand the theory of what we're teaching. But I do. Naruto replied, it's just, nothing ever winds up looking the way it does in the lectures and demonstrations. And everyone in class knows the same stuff that I know, so, you know what I'm saying? He didn't want to come in predictably. Sasuke was just as good in the classes as he was. Standing above the conversing student and teacher, three older ninja figures looked down with two of them shaking their heads at the course of the dialogue. Naruto's veering off course had been a point of concern for quite some time. If something didn't change to properly shape that boy up soon, the last measure would need to be taken. Chapter 2, When You're In. Fresh off of the defeat, once again, defeat was not a strong enough word, at Kusaka Shigeru's hands, Naruto did not go to school in the morning when he woke up, instead going home to go back to the drawing board for the time being. He might as well have gone to school for all of the ideas he'd come up with. He'd exhausted them all. He'd tried everything. Disguises, distractions, bait-and-switch tactics, waiting them out to see if all of them would ever go on vacation or something. He'd done everything short of going up to the front gate, knocking, and asking if he could go in to grab what he wanted. At that he stopped and thought to himself for a long time before deciding that it would never work. Even if they were that nice, at this point they would basically render him unconscious on sight, or way worse depending on which Ryuzanpaku master caught him. The furthest he ever made it inside of one of the three buildings on the property was the time that he just got fed up one day when he was 14. In broad daylight he jumped the wall and screamed at the top of his lungs while making a beeline straight for the secondary house where most of the other masters stayed and lived. The thing about it was that he actually got inside, through the front room full of three surprised masters, and got halfway down the first floor hallway before everything went black again and he woke up on a bus bench outside somewhere. Shock and awe approach. So, he thought, and pondered. and called Shikamaru for help but only got a lazy dismissal to let it go. So, he pondered alone. Then he trained. He ate. Then he pondered again. Then he exercised and showered. Then he slept. And he did the same thing the next day, only using most of his morning where he didn't go to school again training. Either way, he couldn't stay out of school for long. He was probably going to catch hell for missing 2 days already, but if that homeroom teacher of theirs tried to throw stuff at him like he did Kenichi when he showed up late, that bald bastard was going to find a little present in his driver's seat and his car missing some important internal parts the next time he tried to start it. The very next day he entered Koryo High School. Naruto walked the halls wondering where Kenichi was, due to the fact that he could usually find where his friend was on his route to school and make it somewhere in front of him to wait for him. Today he didn't find him walking the normal route, thus he went ahead alone until he felt a presence set over his trusty, ever-present backpack. Ninja. Aileen. Naruto replied almost instinctively to the voice in his right ear. Oh, come now. Why don't you just admit what I already know? Do you know what it would do to your popularity if people accepted you were a real-life ninja? The person continued to say, you'd be a demigod to the otaku crowd, and that's just for starters. Naruto immediately grabbed the figure behind him, basically hissing what he was in his ear in a headlock. That's ridiculous. Naruto said in a loud voice as he and his pest were a temporary attraction in the hall. Don't you have better things to do in the morning than going around accusing people of being ninjas? Ha! Barely human in appearance, Najima Harua was tall and spindly, dark-haired bowl-cut teen with sharp fingernails and strange facial features including pointed ears, a lengthy face with a pointy nose, and beady eyes. He wore the same school uniform as most of the upstanding male students in the school like Kenichi did, and while Naruto was choking him his tongue was sputtering out, seeming to be long and forked. Pulling into the headlock enough to get space to talk, the strange young man seemed to look at Naruto with a sense of knowing, but I know it's the truth. You can deny it all you want to, but I know better. He'd already told everyone in school, and he'd even tried putting in the school paper that Uzumaki Naruto was a ninja. The rubber soles of your sneakers are spiked. It was probably the only rumor he started that nobody believed, because Uzumaki Naruto was a loud, flashy kid that was easy to point out. Their expectations of a ninja Naruto did not make. He didn't walk like a ninja, act like a ninja, talk like a ninja, fight like a ninja, or fight period. As far as anyone else knew, they're athletic shoes. There for traction. Najima was relentless though, because he had the most accurate information on everyone in the school, especially the freshmen. Even on Naruto. He had almost everything on Naruto. Even the ninja thing. How the hell he got that info when Naruto made concerted efforts to never fight in or anywhere around school he never figured out, but he always looked over his shoulder just in case. And Naruto was the only person that nobody believed his intel and rumors about. It was also another reason that he and Kenichi kept trying to find new places for lunch, one that Naruto didn't say out loud to Kenichi because it would link to his ninja thing. Najima kept stirring up the beehive to get bullies to pick with him and Kenichi to provoke Naruto to slip up and fight someone where he could get concrete evidence so he could prove his accusations as correct. If you make me disappear without a trace, that'll just prove me correct. Najima gloated, snaking his way out of Naruto's loosened grip once he let go enough, allowing him to fly down the hallway between students walking to their classes. His PDA was held in the air with his notes on Naruto all the while. You know what you are and so do I. Yeah, I sure do. Naruto said in a loud and overbearing voice laced with sarcasm, pleased with himself for warding off the alien boy again for another day. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, ninja. Look at my ninja-ness. All day. Every day. In the streets. On your roofs. And other than getting folks to look at him like he was a loon, nobody cared. Perfect. He might have just killed whatever little sex appeal he had left with the freshman class women with that display, but it was for the greater good. The thing about it was that Naruto had never outright said that he wasn't a ninja, he just never confirmed it, or when he did it facetiously. Instead, he played up how ludicrous the idea was, because really, it was a ludicrous thought. Who'd believe it even if it was true? And everyone's stereotypical depiction of a ninja was so set in stone, even adjusted for modern times, that nobody would ever believe him short of him busting out a handful of shuriken on the spot and hurling them at a target. That was how he covered himself without lying, but that didn't make him being a ninja any less factual. Now if he could get through the rest of the day without any surprises he'd be just fine, and he could get back to his pressing mission of trying to steal something important from inside of the Ryuzanpaku dojo. Later that day. Naruto had long since come to realize that his luck was very hit or miss. When it was on, and there wasn't anything better. When he was missing, he most definitely knew it, because the shots would just keep coming. Like right now. Kenichi hadn't been in class by the time the first bell rang for homeroom. Odd, because he was a punctual guy. He did show up though, a few minutes late, and he'd brought someone along with him, a new student that transferred in a month late. Naruto hadn't been around to be introduced to the day before apparently when she first showed up due to his absence. Furinji Myo. God damn it. She noticed him immediately and her eyes lit up, but didn't push her luck with the MIF teacher that proceeded to make her and Kenichi stand outside for the duration of homeroom. Naruto then proceeded to make himself scarce for lunch until right when the bell rang for class to start up again. He would have done the exact same at the end of the day, but hit or miss luck. You can be the judge. I didn't know you went here too, Ninja-kun. A rather animated Mio in her school attire said as she managed to lock onto him swiftly right before the last bell, and made it so that he couldn't disappear this time. It helped that Kenichi had slowed him down first by instantly calling out to Naruto and introducing them at the end of the day. I wish you would have said so the day before though. We could have walked to school together after I woke you up. I didn't even go to that day. You shouldn't skip school. I didn't do it on purpose. The chick with the weapons knocked me out and left me there overnight. Heh, I see your point. But that means you skipped yesterday. So, you met Kenichi twice on the way to school and ran into him again today? Naruto said, recanting the series of events that Kenichi had told him before he headed off to karate club. No nodded in confirmation, and now you're friends? Another nod of her head and he had to laugh. That is unfreaking canny, that you would run into my best friend the day after one of the people that live with you kicked my ass. At hearing that Naruto was Kenichi's best friend and vice versa, a thought flittered into Mio's head as she moved in front of Naruto and started walking backwards in front of him, pushing her index fingers together nervously. If you're friends with Kenichi, does that mean that we're friends too? Naruto almost tripped over his own feet mid-step at the rather innocent question, but she was completely serious. Eloquent. And that wasn't really the response she'd been looking for. No, don't do the watery eyes thing. No, don't quiver the lip either. It wasn't fair, she was cute. Stop it. He had to say no. It wasn't her fault that he had to say it. He liked her, but he had to steal from her home. He couldn't rightly say they were friends before he robbed her. Then he'd never be able to do it and feel any sense of pride or accomplishment from it. Yes, I think we are. Naruto eventually conceded to the pretty. He couldn't help it, and I guess that means I have to actually introduce myself to you even though you heard my name in class already. Naruto extended his hand in a gesture of goodwill. My name's Uzumaki Naruto, so you can stop just calling me ninja. And now that we're friends you can stop calling me Ryu Zanpakuheim and start calling me Myo. Mo's expression switched to a rather accusational one. Or are you going to keep doing it? No, I'll stop. Naruto said with a big grin. He just couldn't help it. She hated when he said that, which was why he kept doing it whenever they fought for years. Why the hell do you want to be friends with me anyway? We've been fighting since middle school. Well, I don't really have any. Myo admitted as she fell into step beside Naruto and walked with him, at least until Kenichi-kun, but we're kind of friends too, aren't we? I mean, we're pretty familiar with each other and we know how the other fights. It's either a rivalry or a friendship, but who said it can't be both? That was a cavalier way of looking at it. But it was right up his alley. Nothing was cut and dry. Nothing was straightforward. There were many ways that concepts like friendship and rivalry could be taken. So why not this way? He needed more friends than Kenichi and Shikamaru anyway, because he wasn't entirely sure that he and Shikamaru were even friends. They worked together, or were supposed to, but they weren't really friends. I guess we are kind of friends. Naruto thought, rubbing the back of his head as he tried to put an appropriate spin on things. I mean, you're the only Ryuzanpaku person that doesn't knock me out on sight, because you actually have to fight me first to pull it off. You're the only person aside from Kenichi that's ever even a little excited to see me, but that's probably because I'm breaking into your house most of the time when you see me. Let it be known that Naruto never had any real friends either before Kenichi. On the homeland island, in Japan, period. None before him. Thus, due to this, and what his main aim of the last 4 years had been, his definition of what comprised a friend was basically someone who he knew and who knew him decently well, that was not capable of killing him in under 30 seconds. And because of where he came from and how he grew up, even that was sort of flexible. Kenichi, and Shikamaru all fit that bill, even though the latter utterly despised it. Now, let's go find you a club since we're still here. What are you into? Gymnastics. But what about you? Don't you have a club to get to, or to look for? No, but we can deal with that any time, so come on. Later that afternoon, neighborhood park. There was definitely a bad luck streak going hard, because Kenichi had managed to catch it. Apparently, big dumb muscleheads only got a kick out beating him black and blue during karate club for so long, because now one guy in particular had somehow gotten him into a situation where he had to win a fight or he'd have to leave the club. To make it worse, he probably wound up netting an opponent in the biggest, strongest, dumbest freshman in the club in Daimonji who had probably marked his calendar for that day next week just so he could have a valid reason to beat Kenichi into a hospital stay. And Kenichi deemed that he needed to get strong fast. Hence why he called Naruto first thing after getting home later than Naruto and Myo did after he'd shown her to the gymnastics club, because he needed someone to oversee his training. Not because he thought Naruto was any kind of fighter, but because he literally had no one else to call. So, after making the best game plan with Naruto sitting there and watching that he could, Kenichi and Naruto then set out to put it into action because Naruto pretty much did nothing but entertain Kenichi's little sister the entire time. The next few hours were then thoroughly wasted. Naruto just stared at Kenichi clutch his hand in pain after punching a tree that they'd roped off once. I know I'm supposed to be keeping me being awesome under wraps and all, but there's got to be something I can do here. I can't let him get his ass kicked. I just can't. He had never sat and let Kenichi take a beating or get picked on when he was around. He had his ways to stop it from happening without blowing his self-imposed cover, or in a pinch he'd transfer the heat onto himself and somehow handle it. But the thing was, he wasn't around him all the time. Kenichi had to go into the hallway for being late, he had to go to the bathroom and to get water, they played pretty physical games in gym together, Kenichi had to walk home by himself at a certain point. And the worst one, Kenichi had karate club, where he had intentionally signed up, begged to join knowing full well he was going to get the smack laid down on him day after day. There was only so much Naruto could do without playing superhero, and as badass as that would have been he really couldn't do that. It was only Naijima that somehow knew he was a ninja, but if too many people knew it would make his work as a ninja that much harder. Of course, everyone in Ryuzanpaku already knew, and they were his current mission already, but he was thinking ahead. Past that mission once he finally got in there and took what he needed. If people knew he was a ninja it would make any other mission he'd eventually receive from Konohagakure that much harder. Dude, stop. I can't take it anymore. Naruto finally said, holding his temple after watching Kenichi throw the most piss-poor kick he'd ever seen anyone with full functioning motor skills throw. Come on. This park is public. This is hard to watch. Girls on the sidewalk were walking past and he could hear them whispering to themselves and laughing about the training. It doesn't matter. Kenichi said before throwing another kick that got him to yelp in pain. Got that? Naruto started to say as he got up and walked over to him, was the worst kick ever of all time. Why are we doing this in sight of the street? This is embarrassing. Hindsight. Kenichi shouted before putting his foot gingerly back on the ground. Now come on and help me, Naruto-san. Take that backpack off and work out with me. I'm not taking the backpack off. What? Why? Because I never take it off when I'm outside. Naruto said with a defensive sniff, you know that. The only reason I take it off in school is because I can't fit into the seats with it on. It was one of his quirks, if only he knew. What's in there? Kenichi asked, referring to the full bag. Nobody but Naruto ever touched it. School stuff. He wasn't lying. There was school stuff in there, amongst other things of potentially greater interest. Why's it so bulgy? Kenichi continued to ask out of curiosity before he realized he was getting sidetracked. Gah! I can't waste time like this. Daimonji's going to kill me, and I can't even land a punch on him. Going over to his panicking buddy, Naruto grabbed his shoulders and shook him once. Look, Daimonji's a trash fighter. He's just bigger than everybody else. The boy was a damn giant compared to other kids his age more normal in size like Naruto and Kenichi, so saying he was bigger was putting it a bit lightly. He's a lot bigger than everybody else. The would-be karate fighter said, I think even if he gave me a free punch it wouldn't budge him. Okay, you're exactly right. Naruto admitted, giving Kenichi the one-up over his own attempt at being positive, but listen, this is totally doable. Now where'd you get the idea to train like this? Kenichi hadn't heard Naruto talk so seriously in a while. A long while. So taken by this was he that he picked up a book he'd laid on the ground by the tree he'd padded with ropes without ever even looking away from his friend's intense blue eyes. Here. In this book, he got the motivation to fight from Myo. He got the training program as it were from a book he'd bought a while back. Taking the tome from Kenichi's hands, Naruto flipped through it before sticking his tongue out at it. He put it aside and took a deep breath before turning his attention back to the brown-haired boy. That's not going to work. Kenichi's brown eyes widened in fright. I don't know how we're going to do this, but if Karate Club is really that important to you, we'll find a way. But as far as Kenichi knew, neither of them knew the first thing about karate. He had to win against a beast like Daimonji with absolutely no combat experience in a match contested under standard karate rules. Naruto, that sounds really good, but I don't think even if they'd taught me the basics before this happened, I'd have a chance. But I've got to fight. I can't back down and prove that I'm just as weak as everyone always says. This was the part of Kenichi that Naruto found was his greatest quality. For better or for worse, he stuck to his guns, kind of like him, only way more noble about it. Most of the time it wasn't smart, but a lot of what Naruto did never qualify as rocket science either. He wanted to help. And there was only one thing he could do. He had to tiptoe through the minefield to give his pal a shot at getting closer to his goal. No one helped him in his bid to be the best ninja he could be, and he wasn't about to do the same thing to someone that really didn't deserve to be treated the way he was. As Kenichi thought about how screwed he was, he saw Naruto having an inner war with himself before one side finally won and he held out his hand for Kenichi to hand something over. Give me your cell phone. Why? Kenichi asked tentatively. Naruto just stared at him for several seconds until Kenichi did as he asked. Only then did he give the vaguest answer in the gravest tone Kenichi had ever heard from him, because I only know one person that can help you right now. And I am not calling her house with my phone. It's one of the last two advantages I have left over them, and I'm not losing them that easily. There was so much confusing about what Naruto had just said, Kenichi didn't know which question to ask first. He had to wait though, because Naruto was on the phone, dialing a number that Kenichi had never seen before. The area code said it was local though. The conversation must have been happening. Hello, this is a friend of Mo's. Can you get her for me? He was calling Mio? Seriously? Wait, that was brilliant. That girl was a destroyer of men from what he'd seen. Yes, she made friends today. A pause. There's a very good reason my voice sounds familiar. You should ask her about that after she gets off the phone. One more pause. You'll find out why I sound dodgy after I talk to Mio. Can you go get her please? Who the hell is he talking to? Kenichi thought to himself. He wasn't sure, but was he nervous? Naruto's nervous? Naruto's never nervous about anything. Huge people have threatened to kick their tails to his face, grabbed him and everything, and Naruto had never acted anything like this before. Those were nerves. No-chan. Yes, it's Naruto. He said with a lot more confidence before a pause came. Oh, yeah, I've known it for a while. The phone book. You guys are in there. Messed up, right? Pause. Anyway, I need your help tomorrow after your club lets out. Can you pop by and listen for a bit? So many questions. Why did it seem like they didn't just meet all of several hours ago? The next day, Kenichi's neighborhood park. Alright, I'm here to help. Mio said, riding up to where Naruto and Kenichi were waiting on her bike. Instead of her school clothes, she wore a purple leotard underneath a yellow and green sweater as well as white tennis shoes. But I didn't know you even had Ryu Zanpaku's number for that long, Naruto-kun. You guys really aren't that hard to find. Naruto defended with a shrug. At all. Trust me. That was Kenichi's number, by the way. You should save that. Kenichi gave Naruto a mortified look at being put on the spot like that in front of such a pretty girl that they just met the other day. Already did. Mio smiled at him before looking over to Kenichi, who was still staring at the shapely girl in a bit of awe. Mio without glasses and with her hair out was even cuter than with them. He wondered why Naruto wasn't affected by all of the pretty, or how he got her number after he'd just introduced them at the last school bell. As the beautiful martial artist looked over at Kenichi, she noticed that he was dressed in workout clothing. As he noticed her scrutinizing him, Kenichi realized that he was on and quickly bowed once to her. "Myo-san, I need help to take on a member of the karate club. Please help me. I'll do whatever you need me to." The volume and conviction with which Kenichi spoke alarmed her, but she quickly recovered and ran a hand through her hair to push some of it behind her ear. She could see that he was shutting his eyes tightly as he stayed in his bow, seemingly expecting the worst. It seems like he's used to rejection in situations like this, she thought to herself before looking over at Naruto, who just gestured to Kenichi in turn. With a finger placed under his chin, she stood Kenichi back up straight, and his heart almost stopped at how wonderful her smile was and how close she was to him. "If you ask me like that, there's no way I can turn you down. We're friends, right? But..." She then turned to look at Naruto, who was now somehow standing 10 feet farther away than he had been a split second ago, without looking like he'd ever moved. "Why didn't you just ask Naruto-kun to help?" Kenichi blinked blankly before turning to Naruto, who was now even farther away somehow. "But, why would I ask Naruto-san to teach me how to fight? You don't know?" Myo said in disbelief. "Weren't they best friends?" If that were the case, he should have definitely known why, because he's a dash. Ahem. Ahem. Naruto feigned loud, violent coughing as he walked back over to the pair and made the universal sign for "cut it out" to Myo. "Anyway, Myo-chan here is really good, as you probably know by now." Kenichi nodded rapidly. He'd seen Myo beat up adult gangsters with weapons in seconds. She'd even tossed him over her back twice, so listen to whatever she says and you will be fine. "I promise, Databeo." Resolved by his best friend's relief in their brand new friend, Kenichi turned back to Myo with a determined look in his eyes. "I'm ready. If we can, I'd like to start right now." She liked that look and had no problems with getting started now since he seemed to be dressed and prepared already. "Okay, well, I didn't know we'd be doing this, and I actually planned to run to the store to get things for dinner while I was out, but the others can wait for a little while. This is important. Now dash." With that, she pointed directly at Naruto. "Attack Naruto-kun. Don't hold back." Kenichi looked appalled at the thought of wailing on his best friend while Naruto just let out an aggravated groan and promptly clammed up. Myo was trying to get him to tell Kenichi what she already knew after she figured out that he was hiding it from him. But he wanted to help his friend that had always been a good guy to him, and she knew that ninja or not Naruto was a good person too from previous interactions. Eventually the dam would break. All she had to do was give him a little look. Oh, he was cracking. His face was twisting up all different kinds of ways. Almost there. Fine. Alright. I give up. God apparently wants this to happen, so I guess it's finally happening. If we're doing this, we're not doing by the street though, Kenichi, Naruto added pointedly as they were still right by the tree he'd padded with rope the previous day, using the tree by the road. Boom. Got him. With Naruto's loud reluctant agreement to the terms, Kenichi woke up again. I won't attack Naruto-san. It's fine. Myo assured him with a wave to try and shoo him in Naruto's direction while said blonde stood impatiently tapping his foot. If this was going to go down, he just wanted to get it over with. He's okay with it. I'm not really okay with it. Naruto tacked on, just to be clear, I'm really pissed off by it actually. But, you're my buddy, and she needs to see where you stand since just telling her that you suck isn't good enough. No, she needed to see the level of his suck to see just what she had to build up from the ground level with. He won't even take his backpack off. Kenichi argued in return. He didn't look tough or muscular at all. Naruto never even put up his fists in front of him, and he was going to take a punch? Naruto-kun doesn't need to take his backpack off. Myo said in her own defense, completely confident in what she was saying. He never took his backpack off, even when she'd seen him outside of his attempts on Ryuzanpaku. She's right. Naruto agreed, much to Kenichi's surprise. I really don't. Just do it. Pretend I'm Daimonji. Kenichi then shook in fear at the thought of fighting said brute. Ah, okay. Pretend I'm. Who did Kenichi hate enough to not care if he beat them to a pulp and weak enough not to scare him at the thought of standing up to him? Oh, there was always that guy. Okay, I'm Najima. Go. It worked like a charm. Kenichi tightened his fists and faced his friend. Just hit him? Just hit him. One time and we'll stop. Myo confirmed, he won't hit you back. Naruto-kun, don't dodge like normal please. He'd never catch up if he did. Got it. With that, Naruto just stood up normally and beckoned Kenichi forward, giving one more push to make sure he didn't back out of attacking. Come on weak leg Kenichi. Hit me. Best shot. It hurt him to say that to him, but he needed him motivated to get him back. This was to help him, and with that Kenichi ran forward with his fist cocked. The second he let it go, Naruto tilted his own wrist with 4 fingers fully extended to push Kenichi's fist down while stepping around him, and with Kenichi's momentum the rest of his body followed, forcing him to faceplant into the dirt. Love the intensity. Naruto said, walking around to Kenichi slowly back as he got up, spitting mounds of earth from his mouth. Love the passion. Hated everything else about that punch. Try again. What the hell? Kenichi thought to himself as he got back up to find that Naruto was standing in another casual stance, leaning against a nearby tree. How did you do that? I fell down and all you did was move. It's not that big a deal, you telegraphed the punch. Naruto shouted back at him with a baring of his canines. Throwing haymakers is for losers. Do it again. This time letting out a yell, Kenichi ran at Naruto but didn't throw all he had behind one shot. As a matter of fact, he stopped short, knowing that Naruto would just sidestep him again. From arm's length he winged a punch, but Naruto moved past his fist and to his side again. Nyo paid attention the entire time, watching Kenichi miss every shot. Again, and again, and again. Until Kenichi was sucking wind on his hands and knees. And Naruto sat on his back. How did you do that? Because I'm awesome. Naruto said as if he were saying the sky was blue before miming an orb around his body with his hands. For future warning, the onslaught of my awesome may cause serious injury, inability to maintain self-respect, feelings of inferiority, jealous delusions, sudden decrease in confidence, high risk of humiliation, dignity dysfunction, trouble performing, and self-worth deficiency. Okay, I've seen enough. Nyo said with a strained smile. That was bad. That was really, really bad. She was not a master so she had to be really careful with what she tried to give him. I don't know what to say. But she could still help him. Kenichi, the first thing we need to work on is your defense. If that was how he attacked, he might as well not learn how to attack at all yet. This was better for him. The last thing that Kenichi needed to do was punch at anyone right now. Defense? But how can I beat Daimonji with just defense? Kenichi said to himself before remembering Mio throwing him just from bumping into him from behind, and from Naruto getting him on his hands and knees without hitting him once after just 5 minutes. And then he thought of watching Daimonji beat the crap out of things with his huge gorilla arms until they broke while he knew he was cleaning the room and watching. Teach me. Kenichi decided without another thought to the contrary. This merciful angel was going to give him what he needed to avoid that bloody fate and he would take it. Teach me whatever you want. I'm a blank canvas. Damn straight. Naruto said in agreement, but look at it like this, from here you can't go anywhere but up. Get off me Naruto-san. Let's just worry about teaching you the technique for now, okay? Diffusing the situation, Nyo gave a strained smile and pulled Naruto off of Kenichi's back to let the unassuming aspiring fighter up from the ground. It's different from how Naruto-kun evades. These are multiple steps in one movement with a purpose. Here, let me show you. And so Myo would give Kenichi the steps he needed to learn how to not get punched by gigantic hulking brutes. The same steps he practiced in every moment he could spare for the next week. Flashback, 4 years ago, Naruto's stomach was doing backflips. He and several other kids, some older, some younger, had been placed on one of the outgoing boats from Homeland Island. According to the Kage themselves, by a majority decision, they were seen as those that needed to be dispatched into the world early. The required age for being sent out as an official ninja of Konohagakure was 15. Naruto and his partner for the job in one Nara Shikamaru were 12. They were to be given missions and sent out to the closest place possible for them to begin working toward their assignments. They had done it. It came as a huge shock. After hearing what Irika, maybe it had been the man trying to make sure that he was ready for this big moment. And none of the teachers had ever liked Shikamaru's drive or his practical performance. Nothing. But he was his partner for this, and they were supposed to have each other's backs. The place where he and Shikamaru were to be sent was Japan. From there they would be let off to handle the mission any way they could. For now, they were both on a small boat dispatched from the larger one that had taken all of the kids away from the island. Both were blindfolded, and they had been blindfolded as they were put on the boats and taken away from the island at first. They weren't allowed to know where the island was before they became jounin. Hey! Blindfolded Naruto said, reaching out for his fellow traveler sitting next to him equally blinded, Shikamaru. Are you scared? Yeah. Shikamaru admitted, fingers drumming in his lap as the boat rocked from the waves. I'd feel better if I could see, but I'll be fine. I'm ready. Me too. We're in this together now. Let's knock this out so we can get more done. We don't have to start right away, do we? And just how much time between missions do we get? Both boys were silenced by a sharp whistle from the ninja steering the boat. Alright, listen up. Your mission is to find a stockpile of the world's rarest swords. We have a lead on where they are, but you two will need to do the rest of the legwork and somehow obtain them. With those swords we can sell them back and make a fortune, or outfit our most deserving ninjas with them if we so see fit. They are the finest weapons in the world, make no mistake. And the crafter is dead, so these are the only way we can obtain them. Anyone that holds something created by those that know the secrets of steel will never see a better tool. Begin your search at a place known as Ryuzanpaku. With it he ripped the hoods off of the two boys' heads and pushed them off of the boat into the water as he circled around and went back to the ship they had left from before they could resurface. He had the kindness about him to shove their belongings off with them on a floating raft, but other than that he didn't seem to care. Good luck! The ninja shouted, not even turning around to look at them as both boys floated on the surface of the water. Both Naruto and Shikamaru sputtered for a bit, spitting water around and getting their breath. Bastard! Naruto shouted, slapping his hand across the top of the water, you could have said something first. We couldn't see. Shikamaru shared the same sentiment, but realized that in that whole briefing they were never told about how they could turn in their mission results. Or how to even contact anyone. Or where they were. But there was land in clear sight, and both grabbed their raft of belongings to begin the swim to shore. End flashback, Naruto-kun. Myo said to a sleeping Naruto that she had found in their classroom a few minutes after class had let out. He'd slept through most of the last class with his face in an upright book to try and hide it. The bell had rung and she'd gone to change into her leotard for gymnastics club while Kenichi went to prepare for his fight, but eventually she left to go see how Kenichi was faring. Passing back around the classroom, Myo had found Naruto still slumbering with his face in a book like before. Wake up. She reached out to poke at him the way she had when she'd run across him on the rooftop last week, but before her finger got close, Naruto's eyes shot open and his hand immediately reached down for his backpack on the floor. He stopped moving entirely when he realized who was around him and that he had just been dreaming of the day he first wound up in Japan. His body went slack before he straightened and sat up in his desk chair. Oh. Hey, shouldn't you be in your club like Kenichi is? Today was the day that he had his match with Daimonji, wasn't it? Damn, why'd he fall asleep? He'd meant to catch Kenichi after the bell and give him 3 movies worth of motivational speeches on the way to his clubroom. I snuck out to go find his clubroom and see his fight. Myo said as Naruto yawned and wiped the sleep for his eyes. Did you not sleep last night? She really was a bit concerned. He looked terrible. No, not really. Naruto said dully, idly noticing that she was wearing a gymnast leotard way skimpier than the one she usually fought him in as he stuffed his decoy book back into his bag. I stayed over Kenichi's until it was late to make sure he had those steps of yours down, and then since I was still out anyway, I went to scout your house again in case something changed. That was a very creepy thing to say to a girl, but Myo was used to Naruto enough to know that he meant that in the way that he was going to try and break in again at some point. It was eerie how accepting to that fact she was. Getting beaten to a pulp by her grandfather and the other masters never seemed to deter him. Speaking of Kenichi, how is Kenichi's training going, by the way? She'd shown up every day to help him for stretches of time to assist him in getting the moves down. It had been rough going, but he started getting it, and it was only a matter of making it something he could pull up on command. He keeps on practicing way after you leave. Naruto said, picking up his backpack from the ground as he stood and slung it over his shoulders with a solid thump against his back. I've been trying to help, but I don't know your style in depth. I just remember what it's supposed to look like from fighting you, so I know if he's moving right. The guy was a machine. He just didn't stop. It was actually really impressive how dedicated to winning this thing he was. Kenichi seemed like an entirely different man from the way he was when they'd been in middle school, or when he'd first come to high school. Can he do it? Win today? Mio asked before she started to rattle off concernedly. I mean, a week wasn't enough time to teach him anything past the steps themselves. Moving out of the way is just fine, but can he do anything after that? I don't know. Naruto said, but he couldn't think of anything. Nothing short of an actual technique was going to allow him to defeat Daimonji, and he didn't have any. His punch was limp wrist, and he kicked like a toddler. How could you never teach him anything? Even how to punch or kick? It's forbidden for a dash. Naruto stopped and went silent for long enough to ensure that no one else was around and listening before continuing. Ninja to teach techniques to anyone outside of the clan. It's the second worst taboo we have. Naruto stated, knowing most of the rules and taboos of his culture like the back of his hand. The only time anyone outside of the clan can start in ninjutsu is the age of 6, and the only place a ninja in training can learn is in our homeland. I can't teach him. Even if he was qualified to teach, and he wasn't, Kenichi's body wasn't even developed correctly for the style of fighting he used. It took way too much stamina to pull off if you weren't prepared. They had to train their bodies for 2 years and be content with just punching before anyone even taught them how to kick correctly. Well, if it was a part of his culture, Neo couldn't say anything about that. And from how he defended himself verbally, he clearly really believed in it and the merits for it. Every aspect of martial arts was different. Besides, you know how I fight. Neo nodded, remembering quite clearly Naruto's rather eccentric methods of combat, direct and otherwise. He's into the glorious hero stuff like karate. He'd never want to learn ninjutsu. It's based on cheating and doing anything to win. And with the way I use it? He'd hate it. The second he finds out how I really fight, he's gonna throw a fit. Is that why you never told him you were a dash? Mio stopped talking enough to look around and make sure no one was spying on them either before lowering her voice to a whisper the way Naruto did earlier. Ninja? It's one of the reasons. Naruto said with a grateful smile, since she at least humored his rampant paranoia. So, you wanna go see the fight? Mio spiritedly bolted to the window inside of the classroom and opened it up before climbing outside. Yes, let's go. She didn't even wait for him to catch up before choosing to travel oddly along the rooftop. Naruto shifted his backpack on his shoulders and shut the door to the classroom before ambling over to the window. He'd follow, but he wasn't excited about it. She's lucky I know that I can go that way and not be seen, or I'd have gone around. Seriously, she wanted to keep from standing out, and she did things like that without thinking about them. She'd also been raised with her martial art as the primary, similar to him, but still, he could see why being normal was a class for ninja children. It was only him that could really see her, but still. Anyway, he didn't have a club himself yet, so there wasn't anywhere he had to be. Technically, he could have walked right in the front door of karate club and watched. Oh well. What was the fun in being a ninja if he didn't abuse his training every now and then? He worked hard for it, and doing something with it other than getting flayed alive breaking into Ryuzanpaku wasn't a bad thing. With Kenichi, elsewhere in the school, karate club room, the rules of Kenichi's karate match with Daimonji were fairly simple. Both would start in ready positions and would be told to go until one was knocked down or they were otherwise forced to reset. According to the finality of the rules that the loser had to get kicked out, the only way this was allowed to end was when one surrendered or was otherwise incapacitated under the rules of the club. Aside from 2 missteps earlier in the fight, Kenichi hadn't been touched no matter how many times his gigantic foe tried to knock his block off. Standing in a white dogi with a petrified look on his face, Kenichi was breathing slightly heavily at having to fight for as long as he'd been going for. But compared to his opponent who was wearing the same karate club equipment in the dogi who was pouring sweat, like they'd been saying all week, Daimonji was a towering, broad, muscular man with short dark hair. He looked more like a bodybuilder than a practitioner of karate, as he had even worn his gi with one arm out of his sleeve to show off his muscles. You're fucking annoying. Daimonji bellowed at Kenichi as they stood in their stances again. Well, he stood in a stance. Kenichi's wasn't so much a ready stance as a somewhat instinctive defensive posture with his hands up enough to deter getting hit. All you're doing is fucking running away. Because I can't hit you and hurt you. Kenichi shouted in his head. He'd tried. He'd dodged the way Myo had showed him and had tried to punch his body twice since that was all he could reach. Nothing happened but him getting kicked across the room both times. At this point he was just prolonging the inevitable. He had to be able to do something offensive in order to win, but for all of Kenichi's own strength he could hit Daimonji all day long the way he was doing and it'd be like a fly swatter hitting a stump. Even so, he'd seemingly stunned the other meatheads in the club who were all watching what they thought would be a slaughter. He'd been avoiding attack after attack for 7 minutes straight. One of the third-year upperclassmen, a man almost as big as Daimonji with a sharp face and a close buzzcut, refereed the bout, and even he was stunned. Where'd this loser learn to move like that from? Begin. Dodge all you want, but if you punch like a bitch you'll never win. Daimonji roared as he hurled another punch with everything he had Kenichi's way, nothing but the worst intentions in mind. I'll kill this punk. Kenichi could see red bleeding into the whites of Daimonji's eyes, and so scared of the forthcoming force he'd missed his normal timing for Myo's steps. Trying to recover himself, Kenichi went through the steps, moving his toes inward and then moving them outward while sliding his body forward in a rotation to the right to move through and to the side of the punch. But since he'd started later than usual, his left foot lingered and it tripped up Daimonji, sending him falling face-first to the floor. While the other club members laughed and started making fun of Daimonji for tripping up so casually, Kenichi's mind was racing. Reading so many books made him pretty good at analyzing the things that happened around him. I did that. I actually did that. But all I did was keep my leg out and change his force dash. That was it. That was how Myo had always been in prime position to knock him head over heels, even though she had never put any force behind her arms after she'd showed him what the technique was capable after he'd dodged her. He was waiting to learn the attack part, the striking part, but there wasn't really one. Admittedly, he'd screwed the pooch just now against Daimonji, and all that had happened was that the musclehead tripped over his leg. But he knew how his body was supposed to go after seeing the steps, and he could break down from the positions he'd been in against Myo when she demonstrated and the way she moved what he had to try. Holding his nose as he got up, Daimonji shoved one of the nearby first-year students out of the way, glaring murderously at Kenichi. I'll slaughter you. He yelled as he charged forward. And while he was still scared, Kenichi figured for the most part what to do. Daimonji tried to remove his head from his shoulders with another punch again, but this time Kenichi took his steps, and when he moved himself in position, past Daimonji whose momentum was still taking him forward, he snaked his arm up underneath Daimonji's punching arm and hit him right under the chin. His adversary dropped like a brick and didn't get back up. What? He attacked? That kid just won? Bring some water. He's out cold. I won? Kenichi asked no one in particular as everyone was trying to guide Daimonji back to the conscious world. Whoa. Outside, Myo sat up on the elevated sill of the window looking into the clubroom, hands clasped together, pleased by Kenichi's resounding victory. He did it. That was the real point of the Kuo-Hi-Ho stepping method. On the other hand, Naruto had dropped from the same spot and landed on the ground. Instead of quiet celebration of his friend's victory the way Myo did, Naruto was jogging around to find a door to get inside with both of his hands in the air. Oh yeah. That's my bud. Take a muscle-bound man and drop his face in the sand, Matt. That didn't rhyme, but I don't care because Kenichi won a fight without throwing a punch. Admittedly, Myo was ecstatic at seeing such a good-natured friend like Kenichi come through. It was a good feeling, taking pride in the people you found yourself caring for, like a sweltering flutter in her chest. So, this was what being friends with others her age felt like. She really liked it. Back inside, a bucket of water was thrown onto Daimonji's face, getting him to sit up and sputter until he locked eyes with Kenichi, who was still frozen in the posture that he'd hit him with. Instead of getting up and storming over to belt him in the face, he nervously grinned and looked around at his fellow club members before saying probably the worst thing anyone that called themselves a man and a fighter could say after taking a resounding KTFO, that was nothing. That doesn't count. Any respect he had left after getting the stretcher job from Shirahama Kenichi was lost right then and there with his clubmates. Coward, didn't the loser agree to quit the club? But that didn't count. That wasn't even an attack. Daimonji defended. He looked like he was just short of running away in tears. If he really had to leave, I don't want to quit this club. Then why'd you make the rule? Hearing rules triggered a thought in Kenichi's head and the modest young man interjected with a sheepish smile. Oh, that's right. I completely forgot about the rule involving illegal techniques in matches. That wasn't a karate technique, so I'm disqualified, right? Was he serious? No one else in the entire room cared about that. He'd just put down the biggest kid in his entire freshman class, bigger than most of the upperclassmen in school, and he was concerned with the way in which he had gone about it. Even so, Daimonji had a look of hope in his eyes but didn't dare spout off and lose even more face than before. The room was dead silent until loud footsteps could be heard clopping down the hall and the door was finally kicked open with a yellow shock of spiky hair jetting through and walking through the forest of club Members, that's right. All that buffness for no reason. Kenichi, what are you doing? Put your hands up, bud, you won, Databeo. Actually, Naruto-san, I technically lost. That evening, Naruto had a rather irritated sneer on his face as he stomped away from the school down the street, hands holding tightly onto the straps of his backpack, eyes straight ahead and not even bothering to look behind him. I can't believe this crap. He groused to himself, even though the people desperately following him could hear it too. This was supposed to be a victory stroll home where Naruto could preen like a peacock at his friend's first taste of success. That did not wind up being the case. Naruto-san, it was an infringement in the rules. Kenichi tried to say, I lost. It's what's fair. Yeah, it's real fair. Naruto said, still not turning around. You know what's not fair though? That I spent the last entire week, even all day Sunday, helping your ass get those steps down and battle ready. And when you won against all odds you coughed up the win. He turned around and started pulling at the goggles around his forehead. I lost a week. A week I could have been using to trade dash. To what? Kenichi asked, realizing that Naruto cut himself off in the middle of his own tirade. What else were you going to do? And come to think of it, now that I've got a second to focus on something else other than my impending demise, do you two know each other? Before I introduced you, I mean? He was rather suspicious because Naruto had been acting weird. Weirder than normal even for him, ever since he'd met Mio. And then there was him knowing her home phone number by heart, and how Mio had complete faith in Naruto being able to safely be Kenichi's target for practice without being at risk himself. No/yes. Naruto and Mio said respectively before the former turned around to raise an eyebrow and the latter pouted at him with her hands on her hips. Fine. Yes. Naruto amended, not wanting to piss her off for no reason. We know each other pretty well actually. She's always been a good girl. That got her to beam over at him once again with a smile that he returned a bit diffidently. Kenichi's suspicious alarms started going off and he decided to prod a bit further. So how well are we talking here? Because he had her number, and then he had a lot of trouble in calling it when he did, and he wouldn't even use his own phone to do it. His conclusion gave him a deep dread. Ex-boyfriend and girlfriend? It fit. It fit scarily well actually. It would explain why Naruto never let him follow him after school. And for years there would be times once every few months when Naruto would show up to school covered in bumps, bruises, and bandages. Then there was the fact that Naruto was usually averse getting into fights. He'd also been scared to even dial her number that he knew by heart. And he was pretty good at dodging, to the extent that Mio didn't think for a second that Naruto would get hit. So, in Kenichi's overactive worst-case scenario mind that had been shaped by reading books of all types of genres and constant bullying for his entire life had boiled down to Naruto being Mio's ex. Since she was so knowledgeable about and good at fighting, he wound up training with her time to time, enough to pick up some evasive skill, but she kicked his ass so badly that he wound up in school the next day still nursing his wounds, eventually leading them to break up. It explained everything. It also explained why Naruto was apparently immune to the allure of her sexy, which was the weirdest part since Naruto was as red-blooded as anyone else in existence. And clearly, she had been the one to break up with him since she didn't seem to share the same apprehension to his presence that he had for hers. He seemed jittery at times around her, like he was wired on too much green tea or iced coffee. Both Naruto and Mio's cheeks went red at Kenichi's assumption before Naruto stood there and thought about it. Yes, Mio was absolutely gorgeous to a degree that it could at times be maddening, but Furinji Hayato tore him limb from limb for catching Mio in harmless traps to get her out of the way. What the hell would that man do if Naruto thought he had a chance and tried to date her? It was so nerve-wracking a thought he started laughing. Laughing and shaking, no. Not that I wouldn't, not saying that. Just, no, you're so far off it's just, no. He didn't know what else to say. Mio didn't say anything at all. She just shook her head no, eyes averted to the ground as she wiped her glasses on her blazer. Well, this was awkward. A triangle of discomfiture. Naruto just looked between Mio and Kenichi before turning an about face and walking off for home. So are we all agreed that this never happened? That was pretty much the cue to go home. Kenichi quickly tried to follow as he still wanted to talk about some things, but when saw Naruto turn a corner he sprinted to the end of the block and saw that once again he was already gone. How does he do that? He asked before turning back to Mio, who had been walking along contentedly at her own pace. How does he do that? Mio's eyes were filled with interest and a bit of mischief as she set a hand on Kenichi's shoulder from behind. Don't worry, Kenichi. You should be happy. You were wonderful today. What a wonderful smile. Did she even realize how absolutely beautiful she was? Ah, and that made everything all worth it. The entire week of repetition and humiliation, and hard work, and constant fear of his fate that day was over, and he had been able to prove that he wasn't as weak as everyone thought. So now everything in school should have been safe and reasonable, with no one trying to bully or pick fights with him again. That was how these things worked, wasn't it? That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.